echo chambers are well known, of course. We've introduced the concept of echo prisons on this channel, the idea that people can get locked in to echo chambers through no fault of their own. I want to introduce another concept, the Arsehole Spiral. Now, I've been adjacent to the men's rights movement for some years now. I don't consider myself to be a men's rights activist. I consider myself to be an egalitarian, as I always have been. The issues and problems around men's rights, men's problems, men's concerns have been thrown into sharp relief for me due to my own issues around depression and suicide. I have found the support for men in this area to be lacking where it's present at all, and I have found a lot of the literature, a lot of the discussion and so on around it to be focused on, well, blaming men, quite frankly, for their own issues and their own problems and making horrendous assumptions about them. And should you wish to campaign for assistance for men or the addressing of men's issues, you tend to get scorn heaped upon you, you tend to get, literally laughed at, and you tend to get pigeonholed. And this is an aspect of what leads to the arsehole spiral. It does relate to the echo prison. The arsehole spiral happens when you come out for something, or you make a comment, or whatever else that isn't popular, or that is a bitter pill to swallow, like men's issues. And when I first kind of got involved in these, it was weird to see it happen, to be just someone who was looking to find out what was true and to counter propaganda and so on to get men's issues addressed. And I naively thought that people were just sort of unaware of the suicide rate or unaware of the lack of effort into reinventing or opening things up for men. I figured just raising awareness, talking about it, offering my experience of the mental health system and so on, people would realise, or come to start to realise, that there were issues and might address them. Instead, there was a profoundly sexist backlash. Now, this is the start of the echo prison phenomenon, as people kind of abandon you as though you have some kind of disease that will transfer to them. But it really is something separate. When you're pushed out, when you express something, like a concern for male suicide, that seems mundane and obvious and pressing and something that needs attention, people lie. People demonize. You get cast out. And once you're out there, you tend to find yourself in the company of other people who have been cast out or pushed aside. And at the same time, there is a narrative, a story springing up about people who are concerned about things like the loss of casual manual labour or male suicide or the lack of provision for men's specific needs in mental health care. And that narrative is that anyone who cares about these things is misogynistic and hateful and, one step away from being a terrorist and more lately an incel, though that itself is its own issue around definitions. And if you're the victim of this, you do find yourself starting to question why other people have been outcast. If you have raised something completely innocent, genuinely worrisome, genuinely pressing, and you've been treated like this, then it's obvious that you're going to start questioning whether anyone else who has been outcast or treated like this truly deserves to have been. Some of them will have been. Some of them are bad actors. A lot of them aren't. But you're going to tend, if you've been a victim, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And this does give the genuine bad actors an in an opportunity to exploit, to use, to latch on to some of these unpopular but necessary movements. And that's how the arsehole spiral starts. An arsehole spiral is essentially a feedback loop. So you get outcast, you end up in the company of outcasts for your view or whatever it might be. And the public image of that thing that you talk about, that thing that you do, that thing that you're interested in becomes negative. And because it's negative, it starts to attract people who conform to that negative view. So, let's take a different example. If involuntary celibacy, which is really just people who want to get laid but can't for one reason or another, if that becomes publicly perceived as people who are hateful, who are misogynistic, who want to control or dominate or even kill women or lash out at society, then it's going to start to attract those people. It's like advertising. And when those people come into that area, they're not going to be so particularly questioned by the people occupying that area because they feel that they have been unjustly judged and they have a big personal investment in being forgiving and understanding and not simply expecting the worst in people on someone else's say-so. And so that means that these genuinely horrible people then end up part of that arena. This can be any arena, not just incels, and start making that determination seem accurate or true, which reinforces the negativity, the bad reputation, and so on, which only attracts more of them. The genuine people within whatever it might be, let's move back to men's rights issues, become increasingly diluted by arseholes and exploiters. Arseholes who would never have been in the movement. People with horrendous, genuinely horrendous views that would never have been involved in the activism in the first place if it hadn't been for the lies told about that movement by people outside it. And this creates this feedback loop. It goes on and on and on, and there remains this reluctance within these groups to call out bad actors, to call out genuinely hateful people, because it's quite hard to tell who genuinely deserves to be called that, who genuinely deserves to be called out. I've noticed this in particular when it comes to men's issues. Like I say, I've been kind of peripheral to it, even though I don't consider myself a men's rights activist per se, for some years. And I would happily have defended it and everyone involved in it for a very long time. But the increasingly negative reputation, the increasing prejudice against it, has started to attract genuinely horrendous people. The worst you would have before might be A Voice for Men or something, and their alleged misogyny was very much tongue-in-cheek. It was done for attention. It didn't reflect the genuine views of the people within the movement. But now there are racists rearing their ugly head. There are people taking issue with men's rights activists who happen to be women, who have probably done more for the group and its acceptability in the past few years than anybody else, attacking them because they're women, impugning their motives, refusing to help them or have anything to do with them or anything that they organise. We're deep into an arsehole spiral there and elsewhere. Even amongst activism that many people might consider good, this arsehole spiral problem exists. If you read Jerry Barnett's article on how antifa, anti-fascism used to be, it was a genuinely laudable thing that was fighting for liberal principles, integrated principles, equality principles, against what was at the time a much more minor threat of fascism, not that it's much higher right now. And then you look at it now, and it's full of people spoiling for a fight, and the definition of fascist has broadened to centrists liberals get the bullet too, remember? And that's going to attract violent and delusional people to anti-fascism. And people who are anti-fascists aren't going to want to turn away any support or help or whatever else, even from people who turn out to be arseholes. So really, wherever you look in activism, in social issues and so on, there is this arsehole spiral. And there isn't really any solution to it, because for the problem to be solved, not only would the people involved in the thing have to be involved in calling out the bad actors and the genuinely horrible people within their movements, thereby undermining their own support, but the people outside of their movements, in opposition to them, would also have to be honest about their opponents. And I don't see that happening, because it's far easier to stick the boot in and to lie about people than it is to deal with what they actually say, actually mean, and are actually fighting for. We're stuck in the arsehole spiral. Sang.